Hello, hello, welcome. Come on in. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes as people come in, and then we will get started. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, hello, welcome. A lot of you are all here, which is great. Thank you for being on time. Why don't we go ahead and get started? My name is Kyle Lucia Wu, and I am the Managing Director of Kundiman. If this is your first time joining us at an event, welcome. Kundiman is a literary nonprofit dedicated to nurturing writers and readers of Asian American literature. We see the arts as a tool of empowerment, liberation, and solidarity. Through readings, mentorship programs, our annual retreat, workshops, and online classes, we seek to uplift writers of color and the storytellers of our communities. We offer new online classes each month for writers of color, which you can find on our website. And today, we're excited to kick off a new series of publishing panels for Asian American writers that's generously sponsored by Penguin Random House. Thank you so much all for being here, and we are really excited to begin this series of panels because we know that it's rare and special to be in a place like this discussing publishing, and I know it's going to be a great conversation. Just a little housekeeping to begin. Our Zoom subtitles are causing us trouble, so we unfortunately are going to offer our subtitles through this stream text link. So if you can just click into there, that's where you'll find our live captioning through SignNexus. Thank you, SignNexus, for being here. There are automatic captions turned on, but the live captions will be at this link, and we can drop it in periodically. Feel free to ask us any questions about that if you have them. We also have Asl Interpretation through Pro Bono ASL. So thank you to Christina and Sarika for being here. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded, so we will send it out to our registered participants after the fact. And why don't we just go ahead and get started? So first, I'm going to start with introducing our literary agents, and then we'll give them the chance to introduce themselves to you. And then we will go into, oh, sorry, I see. Well, can we have a recording later? Yes. And let's see, let me try. Okay, great. So we will do our moderated conversation until about 1 p.m. and then we will do an audience Q&A. So we're accepting questions with the Q&A feature. So just feel free to add in your questions and upvote others. So we will start by introducing Wendi Gu. Wendi Gu is privileged to represent a talented range of award-winning and best-selling children's books authors and illustrators. For all children's books categories, from picture books to young adult, Wendi values emotional stories filled with lyricism and heart. She is drawn toward books that help dismantle stereotypes about mental health, ability, and race. As the daughter of immigrants, she sees special importance in stories about migration and displacement, especially as they relate to friendship and family. For middle grade and young adult novels, she enjoys voice-driven stories with contemplative characters. Occasionally, she enjoys truly absurd humor, but above all, Wendi is looking for authors and illustrators who value inclusivity and intersectionality, whose writing and art encourages love and care. Bonus points go to stories from different parts of the globe. She grew up in the Chicago suburbs and spent many of her summers with her grandparents in China. She attended Northwestern University, where she studied creative writing. She lives in Brooklyn with her spouse and dog named Wendi Gu. So let's say hello to Wendi.
Hi everyone. Thanks so much for Kundiman for having me. This year, a few months ago, the picture book that was my first picture book text auction, called Holding On by Sophia and Lee, is about a little girl and her Lola, who loves to sing Tagalog love songs. So putting that all together, it's really nice to be here in conversation with Jade and Kyle and Kundiman. So yeah, I'm Wendi. It's very nice to be here. I am an agent at Greenburger Associates. We just started our own children's books arm called Greenburger Kids. Me and my colleague Alex Slater started that department just a few months ago. So we're very excited to bring even more great children's books voices to the fold. I represent an amazing collection of, I'm very privileged to represent an amazing collection of book creators, authors, and illustrators with visual artists like Ashley Lukashevsky and poets like Rio Cortez and Teresa Siagatonu and author illustrators like Jess X. Snow and Belginder Kauer. I was, as I was preparing for this panel, I was trying to think about the through line between a lot of the creators that I represent. And although, I did write about that in my bio, which Kyle kindly read aloud, I think one thing that I can say very confidently that they all share is a strong interest in inspiring just futures, and also how family and found family can inspire that, most importantly. I tend to just love, so I work all across the children's book spectrum with the occasional adult book. But most, I think I tend to represent books on the younger end of the children's book spectrum, so mostly picture books. And I think another very common thread in the books I represent is that I know I want to represent a book when it just makes me cry. So it's hard to describe what exactly that is, but if you get me there, I want to be your agent. And yeah, I mean, I'm talking to you now from my bathroom and from Brooklyn. And yeah, thanks so much again for having us. I'm looking forward to being in conversation with Jade and all of you.
Thank you, Wendi. Next, I will go ahead and introduce Jade. So Jade Wong-Baxter joined the Francis Goldin Literary Agency in 2021. She previously worked for 3 years at Massey and McQuilkin Literary Agents as a junior agent and foreign rights associate. A graduate of Vassar College, Jade got her start in publishing at Writers House, W.W. Norton, and Folio Literary Management. Her clients include Chris Belcher, Pretty Baby, Avid Reader 2022, Delia Sai, Central Places, Valentine 2023, and Hannah Matthews, You or Someone You Love, Atria 2023. Jade is looking for adult literary and upmarket fiction and narrative nonfiction with an emphasis on narratives by and about people of color, as well as the perspectives of marginalized identities. Her other areas of interest include magical realism, memoir, cultural criticism, and Asian American history. Let's welcome Jade.
Hi, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, Kyle, for the introduction. I am so excited to be here. When the invitation came in from Kundiman, I was really thrilled because I've really admired this organization for such a long time, and the quality of the writers it represents and its programming. And I'm not, I've done panels as an agent talking to writers before, of course, but I'm not actually sure that I have been in one before that has a sort of Asian American focus. And I think that is really sort of important to be in this space with everyone. And yeah, like I said, I'm just really thrilled. Kyle sort of went over my history as an agent. I've been at the Francis Goldin Agency for about 2 years now, building my list. I do both adult fiction, upmarket, and literary fiction generally, as well as narrative nonfiction. And so have a pretty wide range of tastes and genre interests. But again, as Wendi sort of mentioned in thinking about a through line, I think one of the things I really sort of passionate about in my list is that there is no, there is not just sort of one story, especially for Asian American writers, right? Like there's not just sort of one narrative, and I'm really interested in sort of stories and perspectives that really sort of complicate the Asian American experience in some way that feel sort of non-traditional. I too am a sucker for a book that will make me cry, but I'm also looking for things that are very funny, that sort of have some joy in them as well. Maybe books that kind of combine both of those things together. I will also say that I on the fiction side especially, I love a good book that deals with sort of coming of age. I love books that involve yearning in some way. I find myself returning to books about yearning quite a bit. And then on the nonfiction side, things that sort of look at culture and history, sort of unknown or hidden facets, especially of Asian American history, I really love, because I feel like we don't talk about that very much. So yeah, like I said, just happy to be here and excited to have a conversation with everyone.
Thank you so much, Jade. So I'm going to add both Jade and Wendi back to the screen. And before we get going, I'm going to also paste again in the chat the live captioning link for everyone. So there it is. And yeah, why don't we just begin with at the beginning? At what point should a writer start looking for representation?
Sure. I mean, I can begin. I tell authors that you should take the book as far as you feel like it can go. And that is a bit of a nebulous answer, I know, but I think that if you have a critique group, like people that you share your writing with, who share feedback and with you, and have taken the time to read your entire piece, if they have if they have asked all of their questions, and you feel like you have done your best to answer them in your work, and you have reached a point where you feel like it needs another set of eyes, and that other set of eyes is someone that is outside of your network, I think that is a good time to go out with it. Another clue that I give to my clients as to when they feel that something is ready to share with me is if they can write a little blurb with clarity as to why they are writing the book and why this book needs to be shared with others. And I find that in that little blurb, something about their intention is clarified about the piece. But also what I found interesting is that sometimes that little blurb actually makes them rethink certain aspects of the piece, and then they go back and actually add or clarify more of that intention in the work. And I often will then actually include that little blurb that they write, which is just like a paragraph or two, in the pitch letter that I send out to editors. And that I find is always the most persuasive part of my pitch letter, not my description or not even their author bio, but just I find that to be the most like sticky part of why this book needs to exist. Yeah, Jade, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree, and I like what you said actually about having your writers write a little blurb about why this book needs to exist. I might steal that. But yeah, I think that what I most often tell writers when they're sort of in the middle of their process, is right to have it as far as they can take it. But I think even more importantly, to sort of have it read by other people that you trust, by other readers. I think that a lot of the submissions I get, are the writer has clearly worked on it for a long time, but it's not. There are a lot of things that I think would have benefited from having sort of another set of eyes on it before mine. And so I think that that's why having, I mean, also just for community, but also just from on a logistical level, sort of having someone be able to read your work, read it, and then sort of reading their work in return, having that back and forth, you can have a lot of those really great sort of deep level editorial conversations before you get to the point where you're approaching an agent. So yeah.
Great, thank you both. And once you decide that, once a writer decides that they need representation, what are the first steps that they should take?
So if you're a writer, you're probably a big reader as well. And the great thing about novels is that they all have an acknowledgement section in the back. And just pinging back to the first question, in the acknowledgement section, you see that it takes a village for each book. And that no book, even though writing can feel like a very, very lonely process, a book is always made in community. But one interesting logistical piece that always exists in the acknowledgement section is that you can see who the agent is. And so if you're writing a book that feels like it has echoes of yours, or if you feel like you can see your book sitting next to that one on the bookshelf, that agent could be for you. Or, and then I think once you start Googling that agent, you will actually end up seeing other agents that they're on panels with, or other agents that they work with at their agency, who share similar values. So I think that's a great place to start, as far as building a list of agents to submit to. Jade, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that finding, I think that it is most helpful to start curating a list of agents that are going to really sort of love and resonate with your work. And I think, right, looking at the comp titles, right, so the books that you feel are very similar to yours, finding out who represents those books, what their agencies are, as Wendi said, that's all incredibly helpful. I also really sort of recommend, and I know that this can really sort of depend, but Publishers Marketplace is sort of the main website that we use to sort of announce industry deals. So you can see not just what's out already, but what is coming out and who's acquiring it. And for a writer, more importantly, who is selling it. That does cost some money. So I sort of recommend getting like a 1-month subscription and then doing all of your research while you have that, and then cancel it because it's too expensive to maintain. But that can be another really, really great resource for sort of thinking about who sort of resonates with your book. I would also say too that I think, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit later, but starting to craft the query letter is also a really, important part of the process once you're done, right? It is the first time you're sort of trying to explain why this book, right? Like what sort of genre does it fit into? And it's the first time I think that you're really trying to provide some sort of summary of what happens and sort of fit it into the marketplace in terms of what's already out there. And there are a lot of good sort of online resources for that as well. I sort of recommend keeping query letters really sort of short and sweet, who you are, what the book is about. Again, sort of comp titles, always really helpful. And then just sort of looking that over, again, maybe having someone else read that over, all really, really sort of important in terms of thinking about moving into the submission space.
Great. Yeah, I was actually wondering if one or both of you could maybe just define what a query letter is for maybe anyone who doesn't know, and then just explain a little bit like what goes into a query letter. Do you have any tips for a great attention catching query letter? Yeah.
Yeah. Is it okay if I go first, Wendi, since I threw query letters
Yeah.
out there? Just brought us all to this point. Yeah, so a query letter, when you are ready to go on submission to a literary agent, they will often ask for the query letter and then usually a sort of sample of your writing. And the query letter is the submission letter you're writing to the agent that says, hello, I have a book for you. Here is what it's about. Here is who I am. Here is why I think it's important. Would you sort of like to read the rest? And you know, it is a very sort of early version of what the pitch for the book is going to be, should it be published, right? Like I often sort of draw from my authors' query letters to sort of craft my own submission letters to editors. Editors will often draw from those submission letters to create the jacket copy for a book, right? So it's the first sort of summation of what your book is actually about. Um, and Wendy, I'm curious to know if you have sort of different thoughts on this. I find that the attention catching queries for me are not usually like the good ones. Usually they catch my attention in a bad way. But I do think that, again, like it can be really straightforward. I don't need like a lot, and I especially sort of don't really need gimmicks within a query letter. I just love to know what sort of genre you think your book is, what it is about, and that can be like a paragraph of sort of what the actual plot is about, and then maybe a paragraph about what themes you're writing into. Again, some books you think that your book is similar to, and then a sort of brief bio about how you are as a writer. And that's it. That is all I need. And I often just sort of skim queries and then skip to the actual sample writing. So yeah, Wendy, what do you look for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for honestly, I'm looking for presentation instincts. And that could also mean a lot of different things. Usually it just means concision. And having the ability to step outside of your work and then be able to speak to it. And you know, it's really hard to do that because you're living in it. You know, you are it. It's very, even preparing for this panel. I was talking to Jade a little bit about this before, but it's hard to even like describe what you do every single day, you know, like in like one short little paragraph or in 5 minutes or whatever. But if you are able to do that, it shares to me a certain level of clarity and mission. And so again, like I think keeping it as short as possible. I represent a lot of picture books, as I mentioned, and you know, those are usually like, you know, less than 1,000 words, like 500 to 700 words. If your pitch is like way longer than that, then I know that your picture book text or your picture book itself is probably also not as concise as it could be. And yeah, I mean, we definitely, I would say across the board, a lot of agents will look at your credentials. Those are interesting to us, but they're also not everything. You know, you don't have to have like all of the most important and impressive fellowships or have gone to, you know, the fanciest of schools or whatever. What speaks to me the most is how you frame your work. And so when you're describing like the plot contents and stuff, you're kind of achieving like plot description, tone, and world building kind of all at once within those like 5 to 10 sentences. And it is really hard. I think a lot of my clients have find that to be very challenging, but think of it as a bit of a silver platter, and it will be the first interaction that the world has with the content of your book. So if you are very frustrated in the creation of it, totally makes sense, because it's very hard to step outside of yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, those are great answers. And so once you have your query letter, what do you need for querying for each genre? Because I think it might be different between genres like fiction, nonfiction, picture books, short story, poetry. What does someone need to send a query?
I'll just speak to sort of the adult side of things. So for fiction, in order to query, I mean, you need to have finished your manuscript. So the full thing does need to be available, and you need to send your query letter in the first 5 to 10 pages, usually first chapter or so, along with that. For nonfiction, that is usually crafted and sold on proposal. Where this can sometimes get tricky in the adult space is when you're doing a very sort of narrative / creative / personal nonfiction, something like memoir, where I feel that I have been seeing sort of more and more memoirs sold on the full rather than on the proposal. And so if you have a full memoir, that is totally fine. I sort of accept both at the query stage because I know people sort of need different things depending on what they're trying to do. And also just how much research needs to go into their project for nonfiction.
And the children's space is similar as far as novels and nonfiction go. Proposal for nonfiction, and you have to have the full manuscript done if it's a middle grade or YA novel. For picture books, if it's a text, the full manuscript also has to be done. Hopefully it is, because it's so short. But it is, I honestly like seeing it in like a poem format. It doesn't have to be paginated. Just have the full thing done in a Word document. If you are a picture book writer, do not hire an illustrator. That is just never a good idea, because when you submit your the publisher has an entire art department that helps make that search, and they have a very strong vision after they've bought your picture book about how it should look, how it should visually be telegraphed. And they also have access to like amazing illustrators, and I have the privilege of working with the coolest art directors in the land who have told me that a lot of what they do is they're just like on Instagram all the time, just like looking for new creators, which I think is so fun. So don't hire someone also, because also if you hire someone, then you have to pay them, and it's not necessarily a great investment, because you want the publisher to be able to pay your illustrator, and they can usually pay more than you. And also before publication, unless you are paying for writing classes and so forth, you just shouldn't pay for another professional to be a part of your book. I think it goes without saying that you should never pay for an agent before you sell your book. Your agent should only make money when they're able to make your book sale, which is a 15% commission. So for an illustrator, if there are any illustrators in the room, I just like to see an Illustrator Portfolio, and that can just be your website. It can be a separate PDF as well. But what I usually like to see is just your full your range of illustration. Sometimes there's like a landscape, and then also character development on the page. What I really look for a lot is just like nuanced character expression. Can you draw a face that looks confused and excited at the same time? Can you draw a face that looks sad and inspired at the same time? It's really hard. Like I can't draw, so hats off to all of you who can. If you're an author illustrator and you're submitting to me an author illustrated picture book, I want the full dummy, and that just means the 32 pages, the 40 pages of sketches of the book. It doesn't have to be fully done. So the sketches are just black and white is fine, and then one or two full finished art samples, what you imagine the finished art to look like. And there are lots of resources online about like how to format a dummy. I just know this, but it either starts on page 4 or 6, like the actual story after the title page and the end papers. And then for graphic novels, which I also work on, those come in proposal form. They can be finished, but it's so much work. Like I just don't recommend you finishing the full thing. And that is usually like a very detailed outline of the story. Usually it's helpful for my clients to split the books into 3 acts. So a pretty detailed description of Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. And then at least 1 or 2 chapters of the script of the graphic novel, and then one chapter of sketches for the paneling for the graphic novel. And for nonfiction, unillustrated nonfiction, it is similar, just a proposal with chapter outline a sample chapter and marketing details, which describes like where you feel like the book sits in the market, and then an author page about yourself. I think that's every genre in the kids space. I probably missed one, but I hope that's helpful to you guys.
No, thank you. That was very comprehensive.
Okay.
The one question I had is, Jade, I know that I think you represent some poets. So how does a poet get signed?
Yeah, so I will start just with the caveat that a lot of poets don't need agents, largely because a lot of the poetry presses are sort of small, like well-respected small presses that are used to dealing with writers directly, and where an agent sort of really mostly creates interference. I work with a poet because I sort of came up in an agency that actually worked with poetry a little bit, and it can be helpful if you are a poet looking to be published by like some of the bigger houses where having some of the bigger publishers where having an agent actually will make a difference. I would say for poetry, and again, like it is not necessary at all that you do query an agent, but if you feel that that would sort of serve your work, I would sort of treat it much like fiction, where I think you'd want the full collection to be done. You would attach a couple poems in your sample, and that's how you would send it in. But you would have the sort of full collection, because I do think with poetry especially, when you're in the same way, it's important for me to have a sense of what the shape of the collection and what the flow is overall.
Great, thank you. What happens if you receive a manuscript that you think is great, but perhaps needs a little bit more work or development that you can take on? Is this something where do you ever tell a prospective client to revise and resubmit? What does that look like?
Sure. For me, it depends. So I do absolutely. If I like a work, but there is like one, but there I feel like it's got a lot of potential, but I'm not confident that I can be the best agent for it yet. I will usually write them a note, or more often than not, get on the phone with them and just say, in that conversation, I will share with them my reservations. And usually it's a pretty structural question that I have. I want to know, if they're interested and willing and able to make that change. Because if my suggestion doesn't feel like it's in line with their intention for the book, then I'm not the right fit for them. And it's good to just kind of touch base about that. And B, I kind of, at that point in time, because I'm not totally sure, I do want to meet them and see what our like working relationship or what our vibe kind of could be. And then I give them a bit of time to work on it, and then they can share with me the revision. If we both feel that the vibe is mutually good and that my suggestions make sense. These days, it is harder for me to make that editorial commitment, to like have time and like get on the phone with them, just because like, for example, fall is just like a really, really busy time for all of us in publishing. I just have less time to do that. I'm more likely to get on the phone with you when I'm less busy. So like sometimes, depends on the summer, but sometimes over the summer. And I don't usually ask for an exclusive submission period, but I know that other agents do. And so, but I think if they do, it's not uncommon. So don't feel worried if someone does ask you to do that. I think in the children's space, R&Rs, that's what we call them, are pretty common. So yeah, I mean, I think but I would say that I was talking to another agent about their offer and their offering rate with R&Rs, and it seems like it is not very high at this current moment. But I think it just depends completely on the situation and the work. So yeah.
I also do R&Rs. They are pretty rare for me, and I think pretty rare in the adult space generally. When I'm evaluating a submission, what I'm often looking for is sort of seeing, it doesn't have to be perfect, but like is the scaffolding of it all there, right? Like is the structure there and the plot and the voice and the characters. And when I do an R&R, it is usually a situation where I love like two of those elements, and then I have like a serious concern about the third. Because I hesitate sometimes to commit to a project when it involves like a huge restructure like that, right? Like you can sort of change little things, and I will do that often with my clients, but doing that sort of big lift, is something sometimes I'm not sure if the author wants to do, right? Like um, the other reason I'm sort of hesitant to do R&Rs is just because it is, right, as Wendi sort of said, it is an editorial commitment. I usually do mine via email so that they have something, notes to refer back to. But if you are sort of serious about your R&R, it is a pretty hefty email, and you are thinking pretty seriously editorially about this. So whether I do one also kind of depends on, do I have very strong concrete suggestions for where this should go? I think that sometimes there are some manuscripts where I maybe could do an R&R. Like I know that something is wrong, but if I don't have a great suggestion for how to fix it, if like that way is not clear to me, then I'm going to pass, because there is like I can't be the editor on that. I just don't know where to go with it. So yeah. I think my sort of general suggestion to authors when you receive an R&R is to really sort of take it really seriously and take it as far as you can, by which I mean often when I get revisions in after an R&R, I find that the biggest issue I run into is that the author has done sort of gone maybe like 40% of the way there with the edits that I wanted them to make, whereas I really wanted them to like make huge structural changes. And so I think as an author, should you be in that position, I wouldn't be afraid to really sort of read. And again, I know this is a lot of work. So again, it also depends, is this something you want to do? Do you actually agree with the agent's suggestions? I don't think you should do an R&R just because you receive one, if it's not something you feel genuinely excited about. But if you do decide to pursue that, are you like, don't be afraid to sort of really do that big lift and sort of change like everything. I genuinely don't want to see sort of superficial level changes or line level changes. I would like to see like the big structural things come into place.
Great, thank you. I'm wondering if we could maybe go through like a typical process and timeline, although I know the timeline varies, but for a successful project from, the agent offer all the way through publication. So what does that process look like?
Again, you guys know I represent a lot of different formats between picture book or board book, picture book, middle grade, and YA, and even some adult nonfiction. But I like generally how it works is I will, let's say I've offered on your book, and after I've offered on offered representations, or not on your book, offered representation to represent you and your body of work. We'll focus on the work that you've probably queried me with, or one that that we find most exciting to share with editors at that moment. And very rarely do I go on submission immediately with what you queried me. Usually I go through at least one or two editorial rounds with you. If it's a novel, you'll get a letter from me, and it can range from 2 pages to 10 to even more. And then I will also share a bunch of track changes. And then you and I will go through, you will take those edits in that letter and then develop the book a little bit further. And then usually after that, there's like at least one more sort of more superficial round of edits. It's the same with a picture book text or a picture book dummy. I will just, I don't usually write a letter for picture books or picture book dummies, but I will create like a page by page list of suggestions, and then also probably some paragraphs about like how a theme could be further developed. And that's usually 1 or 2 rounds as well, at least. And then you and I talk about which publishers you would like your book to land with, and we come up with a submission list and a pitch, and I write a pitch letter. And the pitch letter looks a lot like your query letter. I like to share those with my clients because especially the pitch letter, especially because a lot of my clients create stories from their own personal life, and I want to make sure that it's reflective of that. And so, and a lot of them also have thoughts about which editors or which publishers they want to go to. And so I do like to get their final approval on that. And then we pick a day that they are available so that I can I pick a day, not that they're available. I pick a day that feels auspicious to them, because a lot of my clients are superstitious, and I understand, because it is your baby and we want to pick a good day for that. And then my associate lines them all up in my drafts folder, attaching the material and copy and pasting the pitch. And then that day I hit send on all of them. But first I personalize a little bit for the editor, because usually I know I've worked with that editor for years. And then I hit send, and then we wait anywhere from 2 days to, I just sold a picture book that I sent out like 8 months ago. So you never know. You really, really never know. And that particular picture book was, sold to not even one of the original editors I sent it to. Like, another editor at this editor's house really liked the book but couldn't take it on, and so sent it to their colleague after like 4 months of sitting on it. And then that editor took a few months to read it, even though it's just a picture book text, and then took it to acquisitions, and now we have this great book that has a publisher. And then, wait, I'm so sorry, Kyle. So the question was from working with them to sale or
to publication?
To publication. Okay. And then after sale to publication, it's like, it can take anywhere from I don't know, like 18 months to 4 years. Especially for graphic novels, like they can take up to 4 years. And so from sale, you wait like a few months for your contract, and hopefully your agent during that time is like emailing the publisher again and again, asking like, where is the contract? And then finally, a few months later, the contract comes. And then your agent negotiates that contract. In the interim, you will probably have started the editorial process with your editor. And from edits to going into copy editing, that can take, Jade, is it like 6 to 8 months for a novel?
Yeah, I think wait, from what? From delivering?
From delivering the draft to
from
copy
delivering
editing.
the draft, to getting to the end of copy edits. Yeah, I think I've seen it.
It can take up to a year, right?
It can take up to a year. I have seen it take a couple months, but I do feel like it's getting longer and longer.
Yeah. It's getting longer for sure. And so from delivering your book to it being basically sent on its way into production, that can take up to a year. And then after it's sent, so the production process begins when it goes into copy edits, which is when basically the book is done, but it just needs to be like up to snuff grammatically, like, and then you need to make sure that if you've described someone's shirt as a certain color, one end of the book, and they wear that shirt again, that it's described as the same color, like very technically tight, like in those aspects. And then it takes a year from that to publication. And in the meantime, I'm skipping so many steps, I know, but in the meantime, you'll get cover art, which you can hopefully approve. And then hopefully your publicity and marketing process starts, I would say, at least 3 months before your book comes out. The longer the lead time, the better. But you will ideally meet your publicist 3 months, at least 3 months before the book comes out. And then during that time, especially the month before publication, that's when your commitments to publicizing the book should be a little bit more diesel, and like, you know, you should be getting requests for interviews from different media outlets. You should be getting trade reviews from places like Kirkus and PW during that time. And then also in the weeks leading up to pub, you should have a launch event scheduled at like a bookstore. And then your book comes out. And then it's out there in the world. And even post pub, there's a lot of like publicity events that you can do. I will say that fall is a really exciting time for kids books in particular, because that's when you know, a lot of like awards are named, and also at the end of the year there's a lot of like best of the year lists that come out in time for Christmas gifts and stuff. But yeah, that's a very broad beginning to end story of a book. Jade, I'm sure I missed crucial pieces.
No, that was incredibly comprehensive. And I realized halfway through, I was like, oh no, I'm making Wendi do all of this explanation. I actually don't have that much to add. I think that what you described, from like point of sale to the publisher to like when the publication happens, pretty much looks like the same on the adult side. So I'm not going to go over that again. The only thing I do want to emphasize with that point is that it takes a long time for a book to be published. I hope you got that from Wendi's answer. You know, I think there's this sense, right? Like you're leading up to submission, and then once you sell it, it's like that's it and that's over. And that's really just like the start of another, you know, at least year, if not several years, before the book actually makes it out. And that is why, right, when we're thinking about what to take on and what to work on, there is a consideration of, okay, you know, what is going to work, right? You know, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now in the marketplace, not just what's popular like right in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think just to speak a little bit to my process of working with clients on the adult side up through submission, again, pretty similar to what Wendi said. If I read a submission and I really love it, I will usually sort of I will like write the author a sort of enthusiastic letter and ask to get to meet in person or to get on Zoom for a sort of offering of representation call, but what is also like a little bit of like a vibe check call, just to sort of see, right, like is the author willing to take edits? You know, are we going to get along? Do we think about things in the same way? You know, if I have a lot of great ideas for something and the author doesn't want to have anything to do with it, or I think, you know, the first half should be changed and the author only wants to change the second half, then like we're not a good fit. And the call before you actually get locked into an agency agreement with your agent is a really good time to figure that out. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I will offer, we sort of sign, if my client accepts, we sign an agency agreement, and then similarly, almost, no, I've never gone out with something that I've received like exactly in the version it came to me. I think the maybe quickest turnaround time I've ever had for something is about a month from signing them, and that was very fast. And that was because it was a proposal, and it was a proposal that the author like could work on basically full time while I was working on it. But often it really is anywhere from like a couple months to a year-ish, maybe even longer, depending on the author's schedule, depending on if it's fiction or nonfiction. And yeah, when we sort of start getting closer to the submission point, I will let the author know, and similarly draw up a pitch letter, have them look at it, draw up a submission list. Another thing that I will do is to really sort of have a pre-submission conversation with the author, because I know that can be, I mean, it's a really stressful time for me, but it's not even my work. So it's like an incredibly stressful time for the actual author who's, you know, sending things out to see what happens. And so we often have a conversation about what expectations are around the submission, how they're feeling, but also one of the nice things about having an agent is that you can have a sort of protective layer between you and like any passes that come in, because like you know, even books that have sold for really, really big, nothing goes out without having some rejections come in. And so I will often have a conversation with my author saying, you know, how much do you want to know and when do you want to know it? Right. So, you know, would you like to see your passes? Would you just like to know who passed? Do you want those to come in at a certain time of the week so that you can sort of be like, you're not sort of just waiting for your inbox to ding with like pass after pass, which can be really brutal. And yeah, in terms of the timeline for selling an adult fiction or nonfiction, again, like I think especially now is so all over the place. I think a lot of the sort of a lot of the wisdom used to be, right, like if a nonfiction doesn't sell like within the first 3 weeks, or if fiction doesn't sell within the first month, like that's it. And that is no longer true. Timelines are all over the place. I would say nonfiction tends to move a little faster, just for the obvious reason that if reading a 30 to 40 page proposal is much more feasible than reading like a 250 page manuscript. But I have had things sell in a couple of weeks. I have had things sell in months. I have had some interest on a submission recently that has been out more or less for like a year and a half, like in different forms, but like that is how long it can take, right? And so there are no concrete answers in terms of the timeline. And I know that that can be a source of stress, but I also hope that's somewhat comforting in terms of thinking about, like there is no point at which your book is necessarily like completely dead in the water. And hopefully you want it to sell, hopefully it sells. If it doesn't, I will talk to my writers about doing a second or a third round. So yeah, that's all I have to add. But Wendi gave the really like good comprehensive overview.
Oh, that was really great from both of you. I just want to remind everyone that we are taking the Q&A in the webinar. So if you wanted to also upvote any questions, so we knew, which questions are most interesting to everyone here. I don't know, we won't be able to get through all of them. So if you wanted to upvote some of the questions to Q&A, we'll start that in about 10 minutes. Okay, and another important question I think that we hear a lot is, how important is it for an author to have an online platform of some kind?
I find this, I think this question is a really good one. But I find the answer of it I just find the answer of it to be a little distressing sometimes, because I think so many people just don't want to be online. And I think it's for great reason, like visibility is stressful. It's also like a full-time job to be out there. And for some people, it comes really naturally. And you see those people on Twitter a lot, and they find a lot of community there, and it's really amazing. But I would say that a lot of my clients are actually quite introverted, and it's a stretch for them to create an online presence. But they do feel the pressure to do it anyway, and I understand that. And so for me, it's about advising them in a balanced point of view on that kind of thing. I don't, they're on this earth to write and to, or to illustrate. They're on this earth to create stories. They're not here to be like huge on Twitter, and so but at the same time, publishers find that to be important. And they find an author's ability to create an online community pretty important. That's helpful for when, we go on the horrible search for blurbs for a book. Oftentimes you'll see that an author's community is the community that will blurb their book. And blurbs are really hard to get because, you're asking someone to read an entire novel or book, and who has the time, But, I think so. My advice is to, at the end of the day, balance like what is a stretch for you, and what are you able to do or willing to do, and kind of like be compassionate with yourself, but also do what you can, because it does make a little bit of a difference. But it's also not everything to be, huge online. Ideally, the quality of your work will speak louder than how many followers you have. But we do live in a world where followers are really important. I hope that this is not a non-answer, but I think that in our world, it's just the best thing you can do is just find a balance that feels right for you, because if you go outside of that, you're just stretching yourself in an uncomfortable way, and that's not a great way to live, I think. So yeah. Jade, what do you tell your clients?
Yeah, I have a pretty similar answer. I think that I will actually say one thing to add is as a baseline, I do generally advise that every author have like an author website and sort of be online in that way. Largely because honestly, from an agent side, sometimes I do outreach, and it is really, really helpful for me to be able to find an author and all of their published work in one place, and to sort of have a brief bio. Otherwise, it just makes it that much harder to do any outreach. So on a very basic level, like not even social media interaction, just like have a website, keep it updated with your links. That can be all, honestly. In terms of social media, I sort of feel much the same way, because I do think that writers tend to stress about it in a way that feels disproportionate to the actual impact it has on book sales.
Yeah.
And so as a result, I have clients who are quite popular online. I also have clients who refuse to join Twitter because it feels like anathema to them, and I think both of those are completely fine. It is not worth sacrificing your mental health in order to sort of buy into this like nebulous idea of internet popularity, especially when from the publisher side, right? Like social media presence does matter to publishers to a certain amount, but I actually think that like things like Twitter followers or Instagram followers are not particularly even well proven to sort of boost book sales in a direct way. And so it is sort of really up to what the writer wants to write and feels comfortable doing. And and some writers too, right? Like they will want to sort of interact, just within writing community, sort of sharing tips, things like that. Some writers really want to put their personalities on the platform, and I think that's, again, totally fine. It just doesn't, yeah, it does not feel worth, as you said, Wendi, sort of like stretching yourself beyond the bounds of what you feel is sort of healthy for you. So yeah, the last thing I will just note on this is that there is sometimes a little bit of a difference in what I tell my fiction writers versus my nonfiction writers. Because fiction, it really does, again, platform is nice. It really does come down to the story and the manuscript. With nonfiction writers, there is a little bit more of an argument to be made for having a platform, especially if you are writing about a sort of like issue-driven thing or something on which you need to have expertise. And again, that's less about social media and more about sort of, do you have bylines, writing about this topic that you would like to write a book about, right? Like, were you sort of, do you have a newsletter that people sort of follow where you are known to write about this topic? And again, that is less about sort of straight popularity than it is about proving expertise in the subject. And that really does make a difference with publishers on the nonfiction side.
Great, thank you so much. Let's just do one last question in our conversation, and then I'll open it up for the Q&A. So just briefly, what are some questions that you wish more authors or prospective clients would ask at the start of an agent-author partnership or at an introductory meeting? Like, what are some questions we should be asking agents while we're deciding who's the right fit?
For who's the right fit? I think sometimes these days I'm taking for granted my own communication style, which is, I think it's good for prospective authors to ask their prospective agent, how often do you like to communicate? What modes do you like to communicate in the most? Just so that there's an expectation set from there that, I'm not going to text you back, or we're going to keep it all on email, or I prefer Zoom calls rather than phone calls, stuff like that. Especially in our shifting world of communication. And then another thing that I think is always good to touch base about before you go on submission is, what are the timelines right now? I think that, especially as Jade mentioned, right now it is taking much longer for things to have be offered on from a publisher. And there is, like, for example, right now, there is a sense of stretchedness among a lot of publishing professionals. And so I've had to talk to clients about, like, maybe, even though your book is ready right now, I think maybe right now is not the best time to submit it. And so, touching base about those timeline conversations right now, and getting a sense of the current climate before you submit is a good thing to touch base about. Yeah, that's all that comes to mind right now. But
Great, thank you.
I agree with the communication styles bit. I think that's really important. I also think that it's sort of worth having, like, a real conversation generally about sort of the agent's working style, how often you can expect them to be in touch. Because I do think, right, like, not, it's going to sound incredibly obvious, not every agent is the same. Agents have wildly different working styles. Agents also have wildly different commitments, right? Like, talking to a younger agent who's maybe at the start of acquiring, but is also sort of assisting someone else, is going to be very different from talking to someone who is the head of an agency or who's at a much bigger agency, right? And so I think it is worth thinking seriously about what the agent says about communication, but also sort of I think it's also worth having a related conversation about the sort of context they're in, right? So asking not just about them as individuals, but about the sort of agency. I often, when I'm talking to clients, talk about a lot of the sort of knowledge sharing that happens within Francis Goldin, and I think that is a real sort of benefit, because I think it's important not just how an agent interacts with you, but sort of what context they're in, what other sort of demands are on their time, and then also what kind of support they have within their company is incredibly important, right? Like, agents maybe operate a little more individually than the editors at the publishing houses do, but we are still, at agencies for a reason, right? We still sort of draw on those resources. And I will say, I also like it when authors ask a bit about some of the, like, other things they can expect in an agency, right? So in terms of, foreign rights, what does an agency do? In terms of film, TV, in terms of contracts, how is that set up? Again, different agencies have different processes, and I think that's just always really, really helpful to know when sort of figuring out what kind of fit, in addition to all the sort of editorial conversations that you might be having. And then I think the last thing that I sort of like being asked is actually whether I have, as an agent, have an idea of who, or at least sort of which imprints I would submit the author's work to. That I find is a helpful exercise on my side, and I think it is also helpful, again, as an author talking to an agent. I don't tend to give out names necessarily, but do they have a good idea of which imprints would be a good fit for your book, right? Like, so much of our job is just sort of matchmaking with different editors. And I think it can be helpful to sort of get a sense from your agent of where they would send, like, a sort of vague submission plan, right? Like, where they might send it. Do they have editors in mind? Do they picture a wide submission for this or a more targeted submission? And also, what will they do if something doesn't sell on the first round, right? Like, will you have that conversation? Are you going to move to a second round? So I think, just like, this is a lot of things, but just sort of talking to an agent about a lot of, I think, the sort of logistics and structural things around the actual editing relationship is really, really important. And I really appreciate it when authors ask me about that as well.
Great. Yeah, those are great questions. Thank you so much. So now we'll transition to taking some questions from our Q&A. So first, I see some questions about changing agents. I'd like to hear more. I'm going to just read from the question. I'd like to hear more about the process of changing agents without stepping on toes. I have one, and I suspect she is not my forever agent. So how does that work, querying agents when you have one? Is there a protocol or best practices to this?
To just start, I think that everyone in the industry understands that that it has a lot of compassion for the fact that people do need to change agents sometimes, and we do just need to find different publishing homes. And so even though it might feel kind of uncomfortable to start this process or to even think about it, because you don't want to step on other people's toes, it is so common. And I will say that I often get queries where an author says, I just parted ways amicably with my agent, and they often name the agent, and they have given me, you know, their blessing to seek out a new advocate for them. And I really don't, that is not a mark against them in my book. I think if the work speaks to me, then that's all that really matters. It would be, you know, after we have some conversations on the phone, I think it would be good to have a little bit more context about like what that agent maybe wasn't delivering, or what that particular client needed. But because I want to make sure that I can make up for whatever they did need. But even that conversation is not in the spirit of like bad previous ex agent, like what can I do to be like the new shiny agent. It's not made in that spirit. It's made in more like every author and every agent operates so differently and like has such different needs. It's just about like basically matchmaking to ensure that moving forward the professional relationship is seamless. I think in my experience, most people have left their agents already, and have, you know, and they're not querying another agent without having notified their current or previous agents. Just because I think it is sometimes a little jarring if your current agent is not notified that they're thinking of leaving at the very least. But that's just in my experience. And I know, and obviously I've heard of situations where an agent had one, or an author had one lined up already and then left their current agent. But I think that is less common, and maybe not the best practice. But I don't know, Jade, what do you think?
Yeah, I think every situation is different. I do sort of feel from like an etiquette slash just leaving, like tying loose ends situation. It is a little better to at least have sort of signaled to your current agent or have had that conversation about leaving them. That way, like I just from again, just from an etiquette perspective, don't feel good about, you know, if imagining sort of if I were an agent and a client came to me sort of blind, being like, you know, oh, I know we were just working together on this, but actually I've signed with someone else now. Sorry. Like that's not a good feeling for anyone to have. And so I do think I definitely understand the concerns around sort of stepping on toes. And I think the most respectful way, to go about that is to sort of have a conversation with your current agent. And similarly, when I am approached, it is generally by people who, right, have either mentioned that they've already parted ways, or their agent, you know, didn't, like, you know, maybe they haven't technically parted ways, but their agent knows that they're looking. And so you sort of know it's all out in the open.
Mhm.
And sort of on that note, I do really appreciate it if authors come to me, and they have just had an agent, that they sort of let me know that up front,
Mhm.
because it's just better in these cases to be really open with your communication. I think I've not had this happen to me, but I've had cases where you know, colleagues or former colleagues start talking to authors, be really excited, and then find out they had an agent, and then that little went on because didn't want to seem like we were poaching. And so I think, again, just like being really clear about that in your outreach to other agents, is not going to be taken as a red flag. It's going to be taken more as a mark of honesty and being upfront. And then you can open the way right to, as Wendi said, have that conversation about what you need from your new agent that you were not getting from your former representation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think transparency is very, very important in this industry. And also publishing is a very small town, like even between like the adult space and the kids space, we all kind of know each other. And so, word could get out and reflect on you in a different light. So I transparency is key here. And also in most cases, there are no hard feelings about having a different set of needs for your book advocacy.
Great, thank you. I'm going to read a question about credentials. So many fellowships and residencies geared toward emerging voices seem to be awarded to people who are already published or have MFAs or otherwise already embedded in the literary community. If you're more of an outsider who doesn't have an MFA or a strong network within the publishing community or past fellowships and residencies, how do we navigate around that?
In the children's book space, I think that there is a bit less of a need for fellowships and MFAs. And so honestly, coming to panels like this and getting some context about the lay of the publishing land is already a really great step. There are also organizations within the children's book space, like SCBWI and Highlights and the Writing Barn, that give you a community and also give you some of the technical information that you would need to start the process. Even these days with a lot of people, art directors and agents, used to go through very traditional channels of like illustration MFA programs or BFA programs. But even these days, it is not as necessary than I think it used to be, because we are in a time when we really want to be supporting artists from more untraditional channels. But that's on the kid side. I don't get that many queries where someone in their credentials says that they did XYZ fellowship, because that's not really our space as much. So I'm sorry, Jade, I'm ping-ponging this question back to you.
No, it's a good one, and thank you for answering it so I had space to think. Fellowships are hard. I do just want to reiterate, like it is not the be all end all when you are querying. I do not like look at a writer who has no credentials and immediately toss them out the window. For me, like it so much rides on the opening pages and how much I connect to them. So I will say that, but I do understand the sort of difficulty, right, of feeling like a lot of sort of fellowships are geared towards people who already are sort of within the literary world, who already have some credentials, and to be honest, like a lot of what I think of as like the shinier programs or the shinier fellowships, they're just like, there are very few spaces, and it sucks. Like it just makes it really, really competitive. So yeah, I think that, again, like I care less about the fact, as an agent, about the fact of like getting a fellowship or getting an award, as whether you've sort of been, and I don't want to keep saying like in community with someone, but whether you have been sort of involved in certain writing groups, not to like, not to be a shill for Kundiman, but I like know Kundiman runs a bunch of programs that are really, really great. I know some other writing programs as well, that are not, again, like as competitive, like are not like just competitive, but can give you a really good opportunity to just take some writing classes with other writers who share some of the same goals, and then you can sort of go off and have your own informal spaces. I will also say too that thinking about having some publications, again, not necessarily in like shiniest journals, like I don't need the New Yorker or Granta or anything, but if you have published in a couple sort of the smaller literary journals that you are really excited about, like that to me is also sort of a good sign. So yeah, I think those are maybe some ways I can offer to get around it, while also keeping in mind, again, and I'm mostly speaking to fiction and then sort of creative nonfiction here, that fellowships are just not like, are again like not the be all end all of querying.
Great, thank you. Another question, do you expect a writer to accept your offer of representation immediately? Is it considered rude to shop around for an agent who fits best?
Um, can I answer, just because I feel strong about this? I think it's a bit of a red flag if they do accept my offer immediately. I get very nervous. Just because I like, again, it is obviously like nice for me if they accept an offer and they don't want to talk to anyone else. But I do think I don't want them to sort of bite just because I'm, for example, like the first agent they're talking to and they're really excited that someone gets their work, right? And they don't know what else is out there. It does feel to me like, um, as an author, it is worth doing your sort of due diligence about who else is out there. I generally tell writers when I'm offering them representation, you sort of let the other agents, who you've sent your manuscript to, know that you have an offer in. You give them a sort of deadline to get back to you, usually like 2-ish weeks, is what I usually see as the standard. And that way, like when you do accept my offer of representation and we do work together, I feel confident that the author has done it, knowing sort of that they've talked to other people, that they know what's out there, and that they feel confident that they're picking me not just because I'm an agent and because that's exciting, but because I am an agent whose vision really aligns with theirs, and there's something really exciting about me specifically that they want to work with, which I think sets up a much healthier working relationship. So yeah, what about you, Wendi, on the children's side?
Yes, I mean, I agree with you. I think once I had a client who I adore, accept my offer while we were on Zoom. And it did take me a moment to recover because I was so happy, but also like, I wanted to be like, are you sure? Like, like, are you sure because, I want them to be able to think deeply about our future working relationship. And in publishing, I think there's an unfortunate precedent of like, the mantra is like hurry up and wait. And so I think we're all kind of almost like, like, now wired in a way that like that waiting is okay, because good stuff can take a lot of time, for better or for worse. So I mean, Jade, I totally agree with you. I'm also of the mindset these days where, I'm just like, take the time that you need. My offer, I feel very strong, in my commitment to making this offer, and it will not go away. So you can take that and do what you want with it. Because I do want to be able to support you, even if I'm no longer, even if I don't have the eventual opportunity of working with you. I want it to be, I want you to do what you can with this offer, and that can, elevate your work, in a different kind of way. Be it like using that offer to find the agent who you always wanted to query your entire like life or something like that. Like that's really fine with me. Of course, it would be disappointing if I am making a full commitment of an offer and they don't go with me, but I feel like these days I'm trying not to have a hoarding mentality about the work that I do. And so I think a lot of great agents I work with, honestly, like Jade, like also are trying to embody that somewhat anti-capitalist mindset. So yeah, totally.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. We have a question about different genres. So if you write different kinds of pieces, maybe adult novels and children's books or nonfiction, different genres of adult novels, is it better to look for one agent who can represent all of your interests and projects, or is it more of the norm for an agent to only represent one project or genre at a time?
I think it depends entirely on what you want. I do have some clients who I will work with on their kid stuff, but they have an adult agent for their adult stuff. So that's fine with me. It really depends on what you would like. But I also have another client who has told me that they're not going to look for another agent for their adult work, and they would like for me to represent their adult work because they feel safe with my communication style, and they want to be able to entrust me with it. And even though it's true, I don't have a sales track record of like adult literary novels. I do have resources that where I can ask my colleagues easily or my industry friends about what the best list is, what the best submission list is, or like what, the specifics of an adult literary submission. And I think that the instincts sometimes for making a sale are pretty similar between the different genres anyway. But it really depends on what you would prefer. So I think most adult most agents will also be willing to let you make that choice. I think for some of the bigger agencies, they might want you to have to stay within the same agency. If like one bigger agency has like a kids books department and an adult department, they might prefer for you to have the same agency just because it makes things easier legally. But if they strap you down, like if they like are forcefully strapping you down like that, then maybe that's an opportunity for you to think like, do I really want that? Yeah. Jade, how do things work at Francis Golden in that regard?
I think it does depend a little on the case, like you said, and also which genres, right? Like if I have someone who comes to me with like a memoir and a short story collection, that is totally fine. I feel very confident in handling both of those things, like cross genre wise. Or even if someone wants to go like a little bit more sort of into like a commercial thriller realm, again, it does become at that point when something feels outside of my own wheelhouse much more about, right, who do I have access to at the agency who does know, right, and who is able to help me with a submission list. Because we do sort of share our submission list with each other quite a bit, and that's that again is like where the agency that your agent works at can really be helpful, right? Because even if your agent doesn't know, they can ask someone else. I will say we don't have a lot of people who write for adult and then cross over into the children's space as much. I think that can be a little trickier just because right, a lot of the processes are the same, but a lot of the actual sort of editor names are different. And I think again, it would be a conversation. I think like, for example, a longtime client I had where I had already sold a bunch of books, who wanted to tell me to sell who had a YA and wanted me to sell it, would feel very different from me from someone who comes to me with their like adult fiction, but also a picture book, right? And like and in that case, like, with the first, it feels like less of a stretch than for the second, where they really might want to have either an agent who does both, or honestly, like, just, I love my agency, we don't really do children's books very much. So they might just want to be at an agency that has someone there who does picture books, something like that. And again, like, it doesn't make it better or worse, it just is a sort of different, slightly more complicated situation. So yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. We touched on this a little earlier, but are there journals and or magazines that you both read to scout new talent?
Um, I will say that if I'm feeling very lazy, I sort of go online and just sort of like see, again, like, this is how social media can be helpful. I will often see what's sort of being published there. Um, I am trying to think if I will often sort of, we subscribe to several like print literary magazines at the office, and we will sort of share those around. Anything from the sort of big, like, these people are probably already represented because they're in the Paris Review, but whatever, we might as well take a look at it anyway type things, to sort of smaller, like, more sort of regional journals that I really enjoy. I will often take a look at places like the Rumpus I quite like, Joyland, although I know a lot of agents sort of look there already, so that sometimes feels a little picked over. I will often go into Asian American Writers Workshop. I personally look at quite a bit actually, because I really like the work they do and the programs they have. Places like that, sort of alternating between digital and print to try and get like a breadth of what people are writing into. What about you, Wendi, on the children's side? Do you do a lot of scouting in that same way?
I am really sad to say that these days I am not scouting as much. But what my Instagram feed has done, on top of shove shopping suggestions down my throat, is it will share with me these really cool illustrators who I don't, who are from all over the world, and that's been really fun, to kind of discover, on my feeds, which actually feels productive and fun. I know I'm aware I just said that you don't need an MFA, but there is a master's program in the UK for illustration, which is not Cambridge University, but it's called Cambridge. And they have a really amazing illustration program there that where I lust after a lot of the illustrators there. Sometimes there are activists or organizers, that I'm in touch with who've done a lot of amazing work, like liberation work that I think is so important to bring into the conversation for younger people. And so next week I'm talking to an abortion rights activist, about what kinds of books they can bring into the space. And it will be controversial to have an abortion picture book, but I'm curious about what kinds of stories we can bring to the table. But and lastly, even though I don't represent as many editorial illustrators, sometimes in very commercial places like the New York Times or the New Yorker, there is just like some editorial illustration there that just like stops me in my tracks. And sometimes that person, because they work in editorial, they're not thinking about illustration as much. So sometimes they aren't already agented, and I'll reach out to them. A few of my agency colleagues have found clients in that way as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to squeeze in one last question. So if you could answer it, somewhat concisely so we can end on time, that'd be wonderful. But some people are curious about what the benefits are going with a bigger agency versus smaller agency.
Wendi,
Well,
both work at sort of small, medium-sized agencies.
yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
I have worked at two different agencies. One was bigger, and the one I work at now is smaller. I think that the benefits of working for a bigger agency are that you have a legal department, sometimes you have like 10, 20 people in the accounting department. You have an agent who has weekly or monthly meetings with a lot more people. So there are, more opportunities for some communication. But I prefer working for a smaller agency, and just because I have less departments to communicate with. I've found that I can actually move a little bit more quickly on my own, because I don't have to answer to a lot of different people. But at the same time, sometimes I miss having, a bunch of lawyers look over every single contract that I'm working on. Having like a structured 401k matching system or something, like I really miss it. Yeah, but that's more about me. I'm sorry, not about the author. And I'm already ruining the being concise aspect of your question, Kyle. But I just to advocate quickly for smaller agencies, I will say that even if your agent does belong to a smaller agency, every agent has a network of like friends and industry colleagues, even if you don't work for a huge agency, you know, like this week, actually, a friend of mine who represents mostly adult literary authors was on the phone with me a lot because I was helping them navigate a picture book situation. And I don't work with this friend, but like we know that we can contact each other if we need to. But at this, you know, my agency, I'm the first person, and me and maybe one other colleague are the only people who like will look over a contract, and that's you know, that's less eyes on a contract, but I can get it done more quickly, and I feel like I know what I'm doing. So I feel like there might be a little bit more expediency with a smaller agency model, but I think what I recommend authors go for is more of the individual and whether or not you feel safe and cared for by that individual rather than the agency. That's just how I feel. What do you think, Jade?
Very, very briefly, I mean, obviously we're sort of both biased. I like to make a case for smaller agencies as well. I've pretty much always worked at smaller agencies. I think it has, again, there are pros and cons to this. There are sometimes more demands on my time because I'm helping handle, for example, like royalties for the whole agency on top of my work. But I do also think it's made me a better agent, right? Like I learned how to do like my own contracts and everyone else's contracts at my former agency, and as a result, now I know, you know, what I'm talking about when I'm negotiating certain deal points. You know, I did foreign rights assistance for a while because I was at a small agency. Now I know what you know, what to think about in terms of like foreign rights for a book in certain territories. You know, I agree that to a certain extent it doesn't matter as much whether it's a big or small agency so much as the individual agent. But I also think sort of what is important is how supported that individual agent feels within their agency, regardless of the size. Like I think that support network is really key. And you can have it at both bigger and smaller places or sort of lack it. But that feels like the sort of culture of the agency and how your agent sort of presents their culture it feels to me sort of more important than just size, if that makes sense.
Great, very, very helpful. Thank you so much. So we are at our time. This has been extremely enlightening and wonderful. Thank you to everyone for joining and for all of your wonderful questions. Thank you so much to Jade. Thank you so much to Wendi. We will be sending out this recording to all of our registered participants, so you can keep your eye out for that via email. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. Have a great rest of your Saturday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you.
Kyle. Thank you, Jade. Bye.